case of Russia, and and similar amounts for the smaller exporters. So clearly the region gets hit hard. The only sub-region that we see here that seems to have attempted to reduce the deficit by counter-cyclical policies is Turkey and Southeastern Europe. So how did this happen? It's interesting also to see that the transmission channels were quite different across the region and really depended on the initial situations. The first wave of as you will recall, we had the first wave that was transmitted through the financial sector, and clearly there were some countries where this had an immediate impact on the fiscal accounts. We list here Latvia, Hungary, and Russia. That was quite clear. I think Ukraine, to a certain extent, was hit almost immediately because they had to intervene quite there. Now, the oil exporters also took a hit almost immediately because of the collapse in oil prices. And this is this was very early in 2009. As you remember, the price of oil went from 140 to 140, so that had tremendous effects on Russia, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, and Kyrgyzstan. And then the third channel that impacted particular countries in this region came through the trade. And through the collapse in imports, as you know, the region lost almost 30% of trade during the depth of the recession, and that had tremendous effects on the VAT collections across the board. And the last channel came through for the smaller countries that are remittance dependent. Came through the falling remittances that was observed in 2009, which was also very precipitous, and it affected Moldova very heavily, but also Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, and to a large extent Armenia. So all of the smaller countries that have become quite dependent. Now they lost on average about a third of their remittances during 2009 compared to 2008. And that one has an almost direct effect on the fisc, despite the fact that the remittances are private flows, but they are mostly used for the purchase of imported consumption or investment goods, and so the channel through trade was also felt in those small economies. On the public expenditure side, first of all, you had some automatic stabilizers. It is true that if you look at some of the countries where the unemployment schemes or some of the social assistance schemes were in existence, you did see some increases. But what became evident is that in many of the countries that were faced with unfinanceable deficit, there was very little to cut without having to go to social programs. Clearly, the first line defense is slashing the public investment projects, and this was clearly done. But in many countries like Romania, Ukraine, Serbia, Latvia, Hungary, it was quite clear that without dealing with wages and salaries or pensions, it would be impossible to deal with it. You may have read that 2 days ago, Romania was the last in this attempt to reduce public wages by 25%, and it survived a vote of confidence. But the same was done in Latvia. The same was done in Serbia, in Ukraine it was done and it was undone. So clearly it became quite clear that given the magnitude of the falling revenues, and given the fact that the financing through banking or through Eurobond issues basically became impossible, there was not much alternative to go there. Now, I should also say that very few countries had nominal declines in expenditures, but some countries actually were able or were forced to do so. So this just gives you with a somewhat different, basically it shows that between 2008 and 2009 expenditures as a share of GDP went up in most of the countries, but that's because the GDP was falling so precipitously rather than because of increases in real expenditures. In fact, if you look at real expenditure growth, the picture is completely different and very dramatic. After reaching a peak in 2007 in most of the countries, the rate of growth in real terms declined precipitously. So you had this discrepancy. If you just look at expenditures to GDP ratios, they seem to have gone up, but that's because of the denominator was going down in such a fashion. Here I have a table on what was done in different countries. I will not go through it, but the point that I was making before is that these big balances did emerge across the region and became the big medium-term program. Now, the other important issue is, and this we go back to what we were saying before about the bond markets, is that the crisis has had a tremendous effect on indebtedness levels, and whereas the region had entered the crisis with the levels of indebtedness by and large, with some exception, but by and large they were quite affordable. The balance has shifted tremendously, and this provides a source of uncertainty, and I think this is the underlying reason why the bond markets have been so unhappy about some of the sovereign debt, in particular the euro crisis. As I said, this point I made before, as we are looking at the post-crisis period, we have to look at the situation where the growth rates are going to be lower than were projected initially. Maybe what the crisis has shown is that the earlier growth rates were unsustainable because they were supported by excessive external flows. But nevertheless, this is something that needs to be kept in mind. Over the planning horizon of a good 3-year expenditure framework, one has to deal with the fact that unlike the year 2000s, where growth was providing extra revenues, this is very unlikely to materialize across the region, with obvious the differences. Now, it's quite clear that there will be more pressure to reform pensions. This is what we have seen across. Europe and Central Asia remains the second area of the world in terms of rigidities. I mean, in terms of generosity, if you like, of social programs. And clearly, it's going to be impossible to deal with the consolidation of public expenditures without dealing with that.